Hello and welcome to Beirut. Welcome for this interview with the governor of Lebanon's central bank, Riad Salameh. Thank you very much for welcoming us.
Welcome.
The situation is very dire in Lebanon. For the first time, the country has defaulted this March. There is no government. People are getting poorer. They're getting very angry. Have we reached rock bottom, or do you think the crisis could even get worse here in Lebanon?
Lebanon needs to restore confidence. There are three pillars that are essential for that. The first one is to balance the budget and second, to negotiate with the creditors because the government defaulted on its payment. The second pillar is the bank restructuring, and the third is the currency. We have to get out from the system where we have three different prices and speculation that are hurting the economy among these, the differences between these three prices. For this, you need a government.
But you don't have one.
We don't have one, and if we don't have one, situation can deteriorate. Central bank is doing its best to moderate the crisis, but the central bank cannot resolve by its own the crisis.
Right. A law was adopted by Parliament to lift banking secrecy. This should allow for an audit, a forensic audit as it's known, of your bank. This is a condition put by the international community to disburse some help to Lebanon. The reason why it's important is that a few weeks ago, the audit company, Alvarez and Marsal, that had begun the audit of the bank said you were not giving them the information they needed. Your argument was that there is banking secrecy, so I can't give it to you. Now that there's no more banking secrecy, will this audit take place and will you give them full access to whatever they demand?
First of all, we have never been against the forensic audit, as some have said.
Yes, many have said so.
And we have delivered to the company our own accounts already. The issue was a legal issue on the accounts of our clients, which are the government and the banks, because the law prevented us from disclosing this information. And we were right. It was not a pretext like some said. We were right because the parliament met and realized it has to amend the law to suspend bank secrecy so that the forensic audit can progress. And today, as the law has passed, it is sure that the central bank has put all the accounts of the others, plus again his own accounts, at the disposition of the audit. There is no obstruction possible from our side.
Right. The question is whether the audit will take place because there's no government. I mean, are you confident it will take place, or will it drag as many things do in this country?
We hope it takes place and quickly, but it is not in our hands. It's the government that is negotiating all these audits.
You've been vividly criticized not only for this issue of the audit, but even by the French president, who became very involved after the crisis and the explosion at the Beirut harbor. He denounced, and I quote him, a Ponzi scheme that was put in place, and he clearly aims at the central bank, basically saying that you had offered very high interest rates for the banks to deposit their dollars at the central bank so that you could then lend money to the government. And when the crisis emerged, essentially this collapsed, and that you are responsible for what he described as a Ponzi scheme.
I would like first to extend my appreciation and my recognition for the effort of President Macron. Like all Lebanese, we really appreciate his efforts at a time where Lebanon needs it and is in a crisis. On the Ponzi issue, the central bank is not an investment bank. The central bank has functions. It has to put injections of funds or withdraw funds so to stimulate the economy or control the prices. And this is what we were doing in different, using different tools. In terms of figures, we have reimbursed all the inflows that we got from the banks in dollars, and we gave them more, $13 billion for the period extending between 2017 and September 2020. Therefore, we did not gain anything, and therefore we cannot be described like a Ponzi scheme. The liquidity of the banks went to finance imports, and that's the audits will show that, because during these 3 years I mentioned, 2017, 18, 19, Lebanon imported for $65 billion of goods, and that is a huge amount compared to the size of the Lebanese economy.
Right. So, I mean, when you talk about Ponzi, people think of Roger Madoff. And so, I mean, you appreciate Macron's help, but you must not appreciate the fact that he is, in a way, comparing you to him.
Of course, I don't think I can match with Ponzi or Madoff. They are much more brilliant than me. But we are a central bank. We're not an investment bank. And if we were had managed so badly the central bank, the country would not have been able to stand till now without a bank failure. And also, the country would not have been able to fund all the imports it needs for the people to live. I mean, the essential goods like fuel or medicine or food. It is because of the reserves of the central bank that this is being financed. So, if we were Ponzi or Madoff, I don't think there will be any money left at the central bank.
But didn't the central bank give extraordinarily high interest rates to commercial banks? And some say those commercial banks were the ones that were connected to powerful elites. And so this was a kind of quid pro quo, that you would give them some money, they could benefit, and on the other side, they would help you and the government.
It is not true, and the audits will show that.
You're confident?
I am very confident. The banks have never been forced to work with the central bank. The rates that we served are below the rates that were practiced either in Egypt or Turkey. And on the other side, the banks also invested directly with the government by buying Eurobonds or treasury bills. They did not go through the central bank for that.
There's a problem for ordinary Lebanese, if I may call them this way. They have huge problems withdrawing money from the bank, getting access to their deposits. At the same time, there are reports that wealthy, well-connected Lebanese were able to get money out of their bank accounts in Lebanese banks and send them abroad to Dubai, Europe, the US. We're talking about billions of dollars. Do you understand how shocking this can be for people?
It is shocking, but in October...
Why wasn't there a capital control mechanism?
I have proposed in October 2019 that a capital control law be voted, or at least to give the authority to the central bank to organize that.
It was refused?
It was refused. So whatever transfers happened, and the total is 2.6 billion, 1.6 being for the correspondent banks and 1 billion for customers, they were done by the banks themselves through their correspondent banks.
And there's no problem? Money will just stay there?
No, the Circular 154 has specified to the banks that those who transferred money outside Lebanon have to repatriate, or they have to induce them to repatriate 15% of the amount transferred outside since 2017 till now, if they are normal customers. If they are politically exposed persons, they will have to repatriate 30%. We're going to follow up on this after February 21.
I want to get to the issue of the exchange rate. Obviously, you had this peg with the dollar for years that probably helped Lebanon in terms of economic stability, but it has now collapsed. You have 3 different exchange rates. So this is finished now. What responsibility do you take for that?
Well, you know, the peg was successful, and in fact, the central bank was buying dollars, not selling dollars, contrary to some who said we spent too much dollars on the interventions. Our intervention started in November 2017 when President Hariri resigned from Saudi Arabia. And then the whole monetary indicators changed directions. Demand on buying the dollar appeared heavily, and also outflows from the country. That was the turning point. The central bank had developed strategies to maintain the parity and maintain its reserves. So in 2019 and prior to the crisis, we had increasing reserves at the central bank. What happened after has changed because banks closed. You had a bank that was sanctioned. You had the government that defaulted. You had the COVID. You had the explosion of the port. And yet, the system you describe as Ponzi or Madoff has held. I don't think that you can blame the central bank for doing what it had to do to maintain stability and serve the Lebanese.
But the peg era is over. It's finished now.
The market will decide on
So it will be a floating exchange rate.
It will be a floating. It will be depending on the negotiation with the International Monetary Fund.
So the fixed rate is finished.
The fixed rate the peg is finished. Yeah.
Okay. Last issue. There was an article a few weeks ago describing some real estate that you have in Europe, and the fact that you or your close family were using companies based in Luxembourg, in Panama, essentially offshore entities. And obviously, as a central banker, the idea of being associated with offshore areas is troubling.
Well, first of all, I had a previous life in the private sector, and on April 8, 2020, I showed my net worth on TV with the proofs what it was in 1993, and the amount was $23 million. And this amount was, of course, given to people I trust to invest. Secondly, I never tried to hide any investment, because the companies that did investment in real estate, these companies are publicly registered in the register of
But why
trade.
in those countries? Why in those countries where we know that?
Because this is how the legal team I have has chosen the appropriate legislation.
So you made no mistake?
Of course not. And the banks that the companies deal with know exactly who is the beneficiary. All this is part of this aggression. So they tell you that you are a thief, somebody corrupt, etc.
Well, that was my last question. Do you fear that you are made a kind of a scapegoat, maybe by obviously people who don't like you, but maybe people who say they support you, but maybe are now thinking, okay, there's a big crisis, everyone hates the elites, he could be a good scapegoat?
Well, I give you the example of a car. when you have black smoke going out of the exhaust pipe, you can say it's the government, it means the engine, or you can try to break the exhaust pipe so that you don't see the smoke anymore. So
That's
the
what's
central
happening?
bank is the exhaust pipe, and this is what is happening. It is really unprofessional to think that the central bank can cause the deficits or the debt, or the central bank knows how the money is spent, and that the government and the parliament, who are in charge of the budget, has nothing to do with that. I let the people decide. So obviously,
Who
I
is
am
behind
scared.
those attacks?
Yeah, they can be behind it for political reasons, for ideological reasons. Some people have ambitions. I don't want to accuse anyone because it is clear now to me and to everyone that if you are attacked so much and every day, it means there is a campaign that is stimulated by one side or two sides or three sides. So anyway, my conscience is clear.
What about your future? Is it so clear? I mean, did you think about resigning? Are you thinking about resigning if you're not heard, or if those attacks continue to escalate?
Well, my priority today is to be able to contribute to the execution of the plan we have devised at the central bank for the banking sector. And this is really where my energy is being focused. Of course, the solution of facility is to go. And I'm not staying without purpose. I am staying because I need to contribute in a solution. And then we will see.
If this solution that you're advocating is not heard or not implemented, could you say that's it?
Yes, we will see. I mean, I'm not attached really, or if I am an obstruction to any reform, they say, I'm ready to go.
Governor Riad Salameh, I want to thank you very much, and thank you for watching this interview here on France 24.